There we go. We're ready
Now we
to
got it.
start. All right. And we do have one viewer already. And I always ask my viewers to write a little comment that says, I'm here, just so I know who's here. Okay. So welcome, nonprofit leaders and nonprofit consultants, I think, today. Please add a comment, like I said, let us know who you are. And I'm Nancy Manning, founder of Powering Your Mission and Austin Nonprofit Meetup. And our guest today might share their screen for just a minute or two. And if that happens, you'll want to click on the screen to enlarge it so you can actually see what's on the screen. Today, our guest is Adri Perez, and Adri is the Policy and Advocacy Strategist for ACLU. Welcome, Adri. And tell us a bit about your position with ACLU as a policy advocacy strategist. What does that even mean?
Yeah, of course, I will get into that. But hi, Nancy, and hi, friends who are watching. My name is Adri Perez. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a policy and advocacy strategist for the ACLU of Texas, specifically for LGBTQIA+ equality. So at the ACLU of Texas, we work to protect, defend, and expand civil rights and liberties for all Texans. And we do this across 5 issue areas. So voting rights, reproductive rights, smart justice, immigrant rights, and of course, lastly, my issue area, LGBTQIA+ equality. So my job is to develop policy campaign goals and execute those plans to address and improve policies that affect the LGBTQIA community in Texas. And our team works at the local and the state level in close collaboration with other departments within our organization, using a model of what we call integrated advocacy. So we incorporate litigation, policy advocacy, community engagement, communication strategies to help boost our message, and organizing, all as mutually supportive tactics to advance civil rights and liberties in the state of Texas.
Oh, you know what? It's interesting. ACLU, what have they been around for like 100 years? I mean, really. And I forgot about the litigation part. That's very interesting. Thank you for reminding me.
That's so funny. I think that's the part that most people associate with the ACLU. But we also use policy advocacy and organizing and communication strategy to advance our mission.
All right. So I know we've only got 15 minutes, but can you walk us through the stages of advocating at the state legislature?
Yeah, of course. So as many of you know, this past year, the Texas legislature was in session for 10 months, which is nearly twice as long as they usually are. So this is a process that we had to undergo not one time, but 4 times for 1 regular session and 3 special sessions. And so when it comes to legislative advocacy, there is what we know, what is known as an inside strategy and what is known as an outside strategy. So the inside strategy is about one-on-one meetings with legislative offices. It is about doing legislative briefings for elected officials and their staff and testifying at the Capitol. Then there's the outside strategy that involves driving a narrative in the media that is consistent and uses a variety of tactics, such as op-eds, letters to the editor, phone banks to contact legislative offices, petition gathering, and petition drives to show that people are interested in this issue. You can do postcard writing as well to send legislative offices little pieces of cards, little pieces of paper that stand for the issue that you're working on. And you can also do events like rallies and protests that help you earn more media attention to elevate the issue that you're working on. And all of those things help drive a narrative in the state of Texas that puts visible pressure on the legislative offices in the state of Texas. You might have seen a lot of this happening when it came to reproductive rights in Texas. There was a lot of this that happened for LGBTQIA equality this past year. And of course, there was a lot of it that was happening for voting rights and a lot of advocacy that we still see happening now as we go into the new election season this spring, and the problems that we're running into because of the bill that passed this past fall. So to get us started, Nancy asked that I start by explaining the process of tracking legislation. So in Texas, we have a biennial legislature that meets only on odd-numbered years. This means that right now, unlike in some states across the country, there are no bills being filed in Texas. But there are, of course, bills that are already being written that legislators are preparing to file as soon as they can. So when can legislators start filing bills? The bill filing period for the 2023 legislative session opens on the first Monday after the November elections in 2022. So as soon as somebody is elected into office, they can start filing bills that following Monday. So it opens right after the election, and you can start tracking bills as soon as that happens. And to track bills, this is what I'm going to share my screen for. You can use a website called Texas Legislature Online. So this is Texas Legislature Online. It is the official state website that we use to keep track of our state's legislative process. It was created in 1996, and it very much looks like it was created in 1996. And you know what? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It works so much better than some other state websites, and we cannot ask for a better tool in the state of Texas. So once you're here, you would have to make an account to be able to track bills. And once you have an account, you go to this tab right here, and you can see that it says My TLO. So that's My Texas Legislature Online. And from here, you can set up a bill alert. And you can do this in one of a couple of ways. I would recommend starting off by doing it for a specific subject. These are the subjects that I was tracking this last legislative session here. But here's the full list of subjects that you can set up an alert for. It is basically endless. There are so many. If you care about parks and wildlife bills, you can set up an alert for that. If you care about oil and gas, you can set up an alert for that. There is religion, safety, retirement systems for teachers, tobacco products. What else? Well, for me, the subjects that I was tracking specifically were related to education and extracurricular activities because of the transgender athlete ban. They were related to some bills for Department of Family and Protective Services because there were some bills that were attempting to criminalize parents for supporting their kids through gender affirming care. So yeah, every time you set up an alert for one of these subjects, the system will email you when there is a bill that is filed that is relevant to the issue that you care about or the issues that your nonprofit organization works on. And as you can see, there's a long list there of different issues. And if you're not sure which ones to select, I recommend going up to the search bar up here, searching for a bill that you care about. So for example, here we have HB 25 and looking at the list of subjects that that Texas Legislature Online has for that bill. That will help you know which subjects you might be interested in tracking based on how the system categorizes them. And then you can add those subjects to your alerts over here. And it'll notify you whenever there is a bill that is filed for those subjects. These emails come through at like 12 in the morning, and it's kind of alarming sometimes, but it will tell you as soon as anything happens on that bill. So once you have your subjects and once the bills are filed, you can track specific pieces of legislation. So for me, for the third special session, I was tracking these two bills. And whenever any one of these actions happened on this bill, the system would send you an email for it in the morning. So this is especially useful because you'll receive an email for every single step of the process, and you'll receive an email when it's referred to a committee, which is an essential step, and you'll receive an email when it is scheduled for a hearing, which is the second essential step. So when it's referred to a committee and when it's referred to a hearing. You can also set up alerts for committees if you'd like. So for example, if the bill was referred to Health and Human Services on the Senate side, which it was here, or here where it was referred to the Constitutional Rights and Remedies Committee, you can set up alerts for those two committees so that you'll get notices whenever there is a hearing or a meeting scheduled for that committee. However, this is mostly redundant, and sometimes bills are referred to different committees than the ones you would expect them to. For example, this bill was usually referred to the Public Education Committee. And if I had set up alerts for the Public Education Committee instead of for the bill itself, I would have missed that this bill was sent to a different committee. And it was done so intentionally so that it would get a vote out of this committee on the House side, because we had been so effective in our advocacy with the Public Education Committee that we had been able to stop it 3 times prior, once in the regular session and twice in the first 2 special sessions because of our advocacy with the Public Education Committee. So this 3rd time around, it got sent to this surprise committee that was stacked with way more Republicans, and it was voted out on the House side. So since we're talking about committees and you know how to get set up on Texas Legislature Online and track a bill or a set of bills, and the first thing that's going to happen is the bill is going to be referred to a committee. It's important to know which legislators are going to be in the to hear the specific bill that you care about. So as an example, as a more positive example, not from this bill, because this bill didn't end up passing out, we worked a lot also with a committee on public health. And you can find the committees on this website too by going to committees. There's the ones for the Texas House and then the ones for the Texas Senate here. And you go to public health and then it lets you know who is on this committee. So when you're doing legislative advocacy, it's really important to know who you're talking to. The Public Health Committee has 6 Republicans on it and 5 Democrats. Therefore, hypothetically, all you need to stop a bill is you need all of the Democrats to vote against the bill, and you need 1 Republican to switch sides or votes in order to stop it. So whether you're talking to them through public testimony when there is a scheduled hearing, or if it's on a one-on-one meeting, finding common ground with the legislator that you're talking to is essential. So for example, on this committee, the chair of the committee is Stephanie Click. She's a Republican. The vice chair of the committee is Bobby Guerra, who is a Democrat. The members are Steve Allison, who is a Republican, Liz Campos, who is a Democrat, Garnet Coleman, who is a Democrat, Nicole Collier, who is a Democrat. And then these next 4 members, JC Jaton, Tom Oliverson, Ford Price, and Reggie Smith, they're all Republicans. And Aaron Zwiener is a Democrat who is part of the LGBTQIA caucus. So if we're working on LGBTQIA legislation, we know that we have an ally who is in this committee. So she would be a good Democrat to work with to find out what's happening in the committee, to get a heads up, possibly if there is a hearing that is going to be scheduled for this bill. And getting a heads up for that hearing is really important because it helps you prepare. It helps you alert your base and your members that this is something that is going to happen, and give them a couple days of advance notice, because it takes a while to get down to Austin, to the Capitol, to be able to testify.
Hey, Adri,
yeah.
So believe it or not, we're already getting close to
Oh no.
Well, so here, listen, let's do this. Do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah, I do.
Well, here's what I'm going to suggest, because we do have 4 people watching who are quite interested. And I would like you to go ahead and get through a lot more of this that we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
What I think you're doing is really critical. And I just want to comment before we finish this up. That thing about the alerts is so cool. And being able to see, like I used to be the executive director of a conservation organization. I could go in there. Yeah, see. So this applies to any mission of any nonprofit to be able to track that. That was really important that you showed us that. And I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear the rest of these steps. So I'm going to invite people to go ahead and stay, or this is recorded, so you could come back later, people that can't stay. But I would invite Adri to finish up this, these steps for us, because I think you're doing a great job. Do you mind?
No, I don't mind at all. I love talking about this stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it. So we figured out how to determine which legislators to approach. So now, are we at the gathering stories for lobby day and hearings?
Not quite. So one of the examples that I wanted to give specifically for the Public Health Committee is that I mean, whenever you're looking at committee members and who is on there, you can take a look at them and like click on their names and find out what bills that they've filed in previous sessions to see what they care about.
Oh,
You can do research on members all sorts of ways, sometimes by looking at their campaign websites, sometimes by looking at their social media sites like Facebook or Instagram to see what they're posting about. Like I did with Representative Aaron Zwiener, you can see what caucuses they're in, and you can attend their events, or you can take a look at the bills they've filed previous sessions to see what they're interested in. So on this committee specifically, there's a Republican by the name of Representative Steve Allison who cares a lot about bullying. He files bills to prevent bullying in schools every single session. So naturally, when it came to working on transgender rights and transgender issues, it made a lot of sense to frame the issue through the lens of bullying.
oh,
So for example, we would say the historic number of anti-trans bills that are being filed this session places a target on the backs of LGBTQIA kids and signals to bullies across the state that treating LGBTQIA kids as less than is okay. And like what you are doing is endorsing bullying.
wow. And you wouldn't think that unless you are into advocacy to this extent. That is so interesting. Okay, I'm sorry, interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, so like doing things like finding a way to find common ground with the legislator that you're working with is essential. Sometimes for environmental advocacy, of course, right? Or sometimes for immigration advocacy, I think what we did was we partnered with environmental groups and activists because they cared about the impact of the border wall on the natural environment. And we were able to form really strong coalitions in that way. So we find common ground with our allies in the same way that we find to build broader coalitions, in the same way that we need to find common ground with the legislators that we're working with. So of course, there are also going to be legislators that you cannot find common ground with. And whenever you're doing advocacy work, time is a precious and finite resource. So it's important to be strategic with who you're spending your time with. Some of these people are not movable. And if you watched any of the committee, you can watch the committee hearings live as they're happening. You can also go back and watch the videos and see if they've said anything about this issue that is maybe, or the issue that you're working on that is strongly against. And I would recommend maybe not spending a lot of time on those people because you're not likely to change their minds in the 5-month period of a legislative session, right? Those are people that require more time or investment, or possibly just electing somebody else to represent that seat to be able to change the landscape. So what else? Another very important thing to consider is sometimes you or someone that you know or you work with will be a constituent of the legislator that might be a swing vote on the issue that you work on. And in that case, having constituents do individual one-on-one outreach to that legislator is going to be way more effective than me going in as somebody who now lives in Austin, but I was in El Paso, to talk to an elected official that doesn't represent me. So if I'm able to host a training, for example, in Lubbock, and find people that care about my issue, and then I'm able to build a base of activists in Lubbock that care about this issue, that know how to talk about it, and that are ready to take action on this issue, then they are able to reach out specifically to the legislator who filed one of these anti-trans bills, right? And let them know, like, hey, I'm your constituent and I don't want you to be doing this. And that's going to be way more effective than just having anybody reach out to that person. So once we have a bill and once we have a committee, the next step is a bill hearing or a lobby day before a bill hearing. And in order to be ready for lobby days or bill hearings, something that we do is dedicate time before the legislative session to organize and offer trainings that explain the legislative process, different advocacy strategies, how to testify, what happens at committee hearings, and how to prepare for a meeting with a legislator. This lets people know that they can work with our organization and better understand the issues that they care about, how to engage with the legislative process as a whole, and it helps us, again, build that base of activists that will be ready to take action at key moments when the opportunity arises to put pressure on key lawmakers. When those bill hearings happen, developing messages to deliver on the floor of the legislature. When they do come, it's important that you understand exactly what the bill does and that you lay out your argument in 2 to 3 points for your position. Either you're for a bill, you're against a bill, but doing it in like a bulleted list of 2 to 3 points is super important because you only have 2 to 3 minutes to get your point across. And if you can do it in a way that they remember it, you will be way more effective.
In a way, you mean you're training people how to do this themselves on the floor during hearing?
Yeah.
Floor, oh, wow. Okay.
So that they can go up and testify before the committee. And so we kind of we do trainings on this all the time. You can sign up for the ACLU of Texas alerts, and we will start doing trainings on this fall.
Do they practice?
Do they practice during the trainings? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done trainings where people practice. It was a little bit different during Zoom, so we've had to adapt and do things differently, I think, this last 2 years. But I've done several legislative advocacy trainings where people lay out their story, how they're connected to the issue, and why they're for or against a bill, depending on their perspective. So you want to understand, again, very important when you're doing this, what will make the legislators that you're speaking to care. A great way to ensure that you can give a memorable testimony is to focus on, again, 2 to 3 points, but to also tell a story that only you can share. So you are uniquely positioned to share your perspective as somebody who coordinates these nonprofit meetings, right? I'm uniquely positioned to give a story about myself as a transgender Texan that's grown up here for 10 years and came out in high school 10 years ago. You want to think about what is going to be most persuasive to them, but usually the most powerful testimonies simply come from sharing a story or experience that is straight from the heart and trying to tie in some larger overall themes that you and several others can repeat in their testimony is essential to driving home the inside and outside narrative to apply pressure. So, for example, we won equal marriage rights because so many people were saying love is love. Like that is a catchy message that like hooked on that everybody was saying. Something that we said a lot during the Texas legislature as an LGBTQ movement was saying trans kids belong. And we would repeat that and like harp on that through different stories and different perspectives. But the unifying message and having one of those that is a strong core message is essential to being able to drive that inside outside narrative. And sometimes legislators still won't vote the way you want them to after listening to your story or to the story of thousands or hundreds of trans kids in the legislature, but they will for sure remember it. And I don't know if that's comforting at all to know, but I know that there are legislators that are Republicans in the Texas House that voted for this bill that still remember the stories of trans kids like Sunny Bryant or like Maya or like Kai Shackley. They remember those stories and they remember those kids and they remember those faces. And the hope is that one day they will change their votes, right? Because changing minds and hearts and changing the political will of the state and the country right now is pretty difficult. And it feels impossible to trust in the process, but it's important to give it your all every step of the way. And that is part of it, right? The first step to achieving a greater, better world is believing that it's possible. And I think that all of us are in this room because we are fundamentally change makers that believe in a reality that is different than the one that we're living in. And so being able to visualize that and explain it and make it possible for others, that's something, right? Like my whole job is making participating in this process easy for other people. And so being able to create those opportunities along the way through this legislative process is one of the ways to engage with the system and to, I think, develop a strong base of activists. One of the stories that Nancy wanted me to share specifically was about a public health hearing that happened in April, because it was during that hearing that I shared my personal story as a transgender person who, and the bill was a bill that would have banned gender affirming care for transgender kids. And this bill it impacts me very personally, right? Because I'm somebody that I didn't start gender affirming care until I was 21 years old, but I came out as transgender when I was 17 years old. And if somebody had told me at 17 that it would be impossible for me to access the care that I needed, it would have made me very depressed and very sad. The time that I struggled to access that care was the hardest time of my life. And I went up there and I shared that quite personally and honestly and frankly with the legislators on that committee. And not a single one of them wasn't looking at me in the eyes as I said that. The Republicans and the Democrats were all making eye contact with me and looked somber in their faces, right? The committee asked me a lot of questions. The committee engaged with me quite a bit and allowed me to speak on behalf of some of the other kids that were in that room that night. And at the end of the night, they cut off testimony pretty early because we had packed the room with activists again. We had prepared to be able to do this, and we had packed the room with activists, and they cut off testimony at midnight. And so a whole bunch of people didn't get to testify. But at the end of that hearing, I ran up to the committee chairwoman and asked her if she would take time to meet with one of the parents and their kids who had driven from Dallas, Texas, to hear their story. And she agreed to it. And we met in the back alley, and I got her to talk in like the back alley, in like the back hallway of one of the hearing rooms. And she met with the mom. She met with the trans girl, the little trans girl, who was so distraught that she didn't get to testify, and was so distraught that the committee was doing this that she walked out crying. The girl, and after explaining her story to the chairwoman started crying too. And like, I don't know if that made a difference. That bill didn't pass this session, and sometimes we were still worried that it might pass the next session. But I know she remembers that moment. Like, you don't forget things like that. And sometimes doing this work also means believing in other people's humanity and capacity to be changed. And so I have to believe, right, that she will remember that. And I hope that it made a difference.
Wow. Well, listen, I think we do have to finish up here.
I
But
know.
you touched me. I know I'm very tired, but I feel like I got tears coming. You have some quotable things you said in there. I'm going to re-listen to this, but I love this that you said. Sometimes it feels impossible to trust the process. And at my age, I have become like that. When I was more your age, I think I was more hopeful. And also, it hadn't become this bad to me, and so it's important for people in my generation and maybe a couple generations before me to hear people like you continue to trust the process in spite of how ugly it has become. And I love this, what you ended with, saying that sometimes you have to just believe in the other person's humanity. It's gotten very hard for me. So it's important to hear you say that. And I so much appreciate that you've shared this today. And I will say that I'm going to put this up on YouTube. I hope people watch it. This is very important. What you're doing is very important, and you're obviously extremely effective. So keep that energy, Adri. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. And I also wanted to tell people that are listening that on Friday, I believe I have posted Adri's article. What was the name of it? Was Bazaar? What was the name of the
Harper's Bazaar?
Harper's Bazaar. Yes.
What it takes to fight for trans kids in Texas.
Yes, I posted every Friday. I do Friday finds in my group, and I use that one as my Friday find.
Oh, nice.
So I hope people will read that. It's a very powerful story. You're excellent at what you do, Adri.
Thank you so much.
And I will tell people, join us next month for Nonprofit Leadership Month. And you're going to see a link, I hope, to the webinar I'm doing for Bloomerang. I'm doing that on February 3rd. So again, thank you, Adri. I can't thank you enough for taking your time. I know it's very precious, your time. So thank you for sharing.
It was lovely being here. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.